Hello, and welcome to A Dash of Salt with AJ. I'm your host, Ahsoka Jackson, author, podcaster, poet, and freelance proofreader. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the fight between Eren and Galliard, plus the other combat we got from Eren in this episode. Now, the climax of that sequence, when Eren figures out how to get through the crystal and then executes that plan, I gotta be real. For me, it felt more satisfying overall in the manga, and I don't think it's just because the manga was my first experience of it. I think, as I've said with other moments, that the more minimalist style of the manga helps focus your attention on the key moments more intensely. In watching the anime episode, things felt super overwhelming and chaotic, and there was so much going on. In some ways, that was wonderful. It's like what I said before about episode 5. Even though episode 5 was a largely drama and conversation episode rather than an action one, what both episodes have in common is that John Wick 3 feel of being absolutely crammed full of goodness, to the point where it can feel a little overwhelming and breathlessness-inducing. Overall, that is awesome, and I'm glad that there's so much content, and that it really sweeps you up in the chaos of battle and gives you that hectic feeling, and really thrills you as a fan. But I also feel that a downside of that can be the difficulty in focusing on individual moments, especially some of the slower, more still moments. The one where Eren turns Galliard into a giant nutcracker. As excited as I had been for that moment, it didn't carry quite the sense of impact that I had hoped, and I feel that's because there was just so much going on, and it felt like there wasn't enough breathing space emotionally to really focus on and feel that scene as much as I would have liked. And the interesting thing is, the show didn't actually skimp on that moment. They gave it actual room to breathe, so I'm happy about that, and very happy they didn't rush through the moment itself. I think it's just that the overall chaotic feel of the episode and how much was crammed in there ended up making the moment not feel as impactful as it would have been ideal. Again, to be clear, they did not rush the moment, and they were actually able to give that battle between the two more space than the abbreviated manga form, you know? So that is not my complaint here. And I honestly feel kind of bad, because they clearly did take the time with the sequence itself, and I applaud them for that. Now, here's some stuff I did love about the scenes we got with Eren in this episode. I already sort of mentioned that I really enjoyed seeing him and Mikasa disable Galliard like they did, and just as an overall thing, I loved seeing and hearing Eren in action during this episode. I remember when I first saw this in the manga, and he transformed for a third time, which is something we've never seen him do before. In fact, I think that's the most successive full transformations we've seen of any character at this point, right? And I know Galliard was also shocked at this as well. And there's material from the first 3 seasons of the manga where Zoe is conducting her experiments, and we see Eren's limitations when it came to transforming. And then Annie, who is highly adept at using her Titan form, we've seen her have 2 fully functional transformations in a row. So I was just really happy seeing Eren able to do that, just transform twice in a row. But when he transformed for the 3rd time, that was absolutely a jaw-dropping moment for me. And one thing I love here is that while I had seen that particular section already, so didn't have the surprise factor, they really did capture how freaking kick-butt it was in a way that they were uniquely able to in an anime format. Because here we actually had the voice acting to convey the dialogue. Once again, that delivery was perfect. I don't plan on making a habit of this, but I definitely want to actually showcase a couple of moments from the audio. Fair use and all that. These are both of the dialogue sections we get from Eren in this episode. It doesn't take up much time, but wow, do they make the most of it.
アギトとはまるで違う。
これがアギトの力か。なるほど。
It's once again striking to just hear everything conveyed in Eren's voice now. You hear some of that familiar intensity and these underlying notes of both ferocity and determination, but it's like they're both restrained now, sort of like he's both saving his energy and, probably more importantly, he's keeping them checked enough so that he can calmly analyze and focus. But those aspects are certainly not gone, and there's something about hearing that coupled with that calmer side, and also seeing the tangible results of that. Holy cow, this dude is scary to go up against. One of my favorite parts was definitely the delivery of that line, "You've got no more moves to play." And once again, I love how darn menacing and intimidating his voice actually sounds, despite the fact that he's not screaming bloody murder. Yet. You know, come to think of it, if he does eventually break form and start yelling like we're used to from him, then you really will know he's ticked, huh? And look, even though the actual moment where he cracks the crystal and consumes the Titan wasn't as satisfying for me here as it was in the manga, the episode still retains that core element of conveying just how razor-sharp Eren is now and how he's able to connect the dots so quickly. Just with figuring out how the Warhammer's powers worked and how the transformation itself worked, he also went super quickly from using the crystal to block Galliard's attack at the last second to realizing that Galliard's powers were just the thing he needed to break through. Almost like how a diamond is able to scratch other diamonds. Just the timeline of how quickly his thoughts flowed, and then the voice acting and facial expressions, it was very satisfying. And just conceptually, it's definitely very harsh and brutal, and it had to be very humiliating for Galliard, but there's definitely a darkly humorous and very satisfying element to how Eren takes the enemy's own weapons and abilities and turns it all against them. And it's just plain impressive what he does in this episode. It's a heck of a thing to be up against an opponent who can not only use their own weapons and techniques, but also go beyond that and turn your own weapons against you. It also reminds me of that point I made before about how folks' attacks against Paradis and the people of Paradis keep backfiring ultimately. Alright guys, thanks for listening to today, and I hope you've had a great time. If you're enjoying the podcast, please don't forget to subscribe and turn your notifications on so you can get updates. And you can help make the podcast more visible for new viewers and listeners by leaving a like, share, comment, or review on whichever platform you use to listen. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, social media, etc. Be blessed and stay salty.